The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop, throwing Marguerite Vance forward against the worn leather seat, her hands clutching the tattered correspondence that had brought her 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to this dusty corner of Colorado territory in the summer of 1876. She had memorized every word of those letters, the elegant script promising a life of modest comfort with a prosperous rancher named Samuel Henderson, who owned prime grazing land outside Ouray. What she held in her trembling fingers was a different letter entirely, one she had discovered folded inside her trunk just that morning, bearing an address that matched the one in Samuel Henderson's correspondence, but with a completely different ranch name scrawled across the top. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the driver called out their arrival at the Silver Creek Ranch, but the name that echoed in her memory was Golden Valley Ranch, the place where Samuel Henderson supposedly awaited his mail-order bride. The door swung open, and Marguerite stepped down onto Colorado soil, her traveling dress covered in a fine layer of dust that matched the pale gray of the mountains rising in the distance. The ranch before her looked nothing like the description in Samuel's letters. Instead of the sprawling two-story house with the wraparound porch, she saw a modest but well-maintained single-story structure with a steep roof and sturdy cedar walls. The barn stood perhaps 50 yards away, its red paint faded but its frame solid and true. Horses moved in the corral beyond, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. Everything spoke of hard work and careful attention, but it was not the place she had been promised. A man emerged from the barn, tall and lean with shoulders that stretched the fabric of his work shirt. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his surroundings, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each stride. As he drew closer, Marguerite could see the sun had weathered his face into sharp planes and angles, though he could not have been much past 30. His hair was the color of wheat just before harvest, pushed back from his forehead and curling slightly at his collar. Eyes the shade of a summer sky studied her with open curiosity and something that might have been concern. "Miss Vance." His voice carried the roughness of a man who spent more time talking to horses than people, but there was a gentleness underneath that surprised her. "I am afraid there has been some mistake. I did not send for a mail-order bride." Marguerite's stomach dropped like a stone down a well. She pulled out the letters with shaking hands, comparing the address on the envelope to the wooden sign hanging from the ranch gate. Silver Creek Ranch, owned by one Samuel Jackson according to the brass plate nailed beneath it. Not Samuel Henderson, not Golden Valley Ranch. Her vision blurred at the edges, and she forced herself to breathe slowly through her nose the way her mother had taught her before the fever took her 5 years ago. "I was meant for Golden Valley Ranch," she said, hating how her voice wavered. "Samuel Henderson sent for me. We have been corresponding for 6 months. He promised me a home, a position as his wife. I sold everything I had in Philadelphia to come here." The cowboy, Samuel Jackson, removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, marks left by years of squinting into the western sun. "Golden Valley is the Henderson place. It is about 8 miles northeast of here, up in the high country. But Miss Vance, I am sorry to tell you this, but Samuel Henderson died 3 weeks ago, threw from his horse during a storm, broke his neck." The world tilted sideways, and Marguerite felt her knees start to buckle. Samuel Jackson moved faster than seemed possible for a man his size, catching her elbow and steadying her before she could fall. His hand was calloused and warm through the thin fabric of her sleeve. She could smell horse and leather and something clean like pine soap. For a moment, she let herself lean into that strength, too shocked to maintain the rigid propriety her aunt had drilled into her throughout her childhood. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. The truth of it crashed over her like a wave. She had 73 cents in her reticule, no family living that would claim her, and no means of returning east even if she wanted to face the shame of such a failure. The other women at the boarding house had whispered behind their hands when she announced her plans, placing bets on how quickly she would come crawling back. Mrs. Patterson, the landlady, had made it clear there would be no room for Marguerite if she changed her mind. Samuel Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his hand still supporting her elbow. She could feel the weight of his gaze, assessing but not unkind. When he spoke, his words came slowly, as if he were working through a problem that required careful consideration. "The stage does not come back through for 5 days. You can stay here until then, get your bearings, figure out what you want to do next. I have a spare room that belonged to my sister before she married and moved to Denver. It is clean and has a good bed. You would be safe here, Miss Vance." "I give you my word on that." Something in his tone made her look up, really look at him. His eyes were steady and honest, the kind of eyes that did not know how to lie. There was no calculation in his expression, no hint of improper intention. Just simple human decency offered without expectation of return. It made her throat tight with unexpected emotion. "I could not impose," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew she had no choice. The alternative was spending the night in Auray itself, burning through her meager funds on a hotel room she could not afford. "It is not an imposition if I am offering," Samuel said. He released her elbow and stepped back, giving her space to breathe and think. "I understand if you are uncomfortable with the arrangement. I could ask my neighbor Mrs. Chen to come stay as well, for propriety's sake. She is a widow with grown children. Good company, and she would not mind." The fact that he thought of it, that he understood the delicacy of her position, made something inside Marguerite's chest ease slightly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Samuel picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing and headed toward the house. Marguerite followed, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Everything she had planned, every hope she had nurtured during the long journey west, had crumbled to dust in the span of 5 minutes. The inside of the house was surprisingly neat, with simple furniture that showed signs of careful maintenance. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean, though decidedly masculine in its lack of decoration. No curtains softened the windows. No rugs warmed the wooden floor. It was a place where a man lived alone, taking care of necessities without thought for comfort or beauty. Samuel set her trunk down in a small bedroom that held a narrow bed, a dresser, and a chair positioned near the window. True to his word, the room was immaculate. Sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. The bed was made with military precision, the quilt faded but clean. "I will ride over and ask Mrs. Chen to come," Samuel said from the doorway. "Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. There is fresh water in the pitcher by the basin. Make yourself at home, Miss Vance." He was gone before she could thank him, his boots echoing across the wooden floor and then fading as he headed toward the barn. Marguerite sank down onto the bed and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. She cried for her mother, dead these 5 years. She cried for her father, lost to drink and despair 2 years later. She cried for Samuel Henderson, a man she had never met but who had represented hope and possibility. Most of all, she cried for herself, for the future she had imagined and the crushing uncertainty that now lay ahead. When the tears finally subsided, She washed her face in the basin and unpacked a fresh dress from her trunk. The traveling clothes were ruined by dust and sweat, and she wanted to present herself properly when Mrs. Chen arrived. She changed quickly, hyper-aware that she was alone in a strange man's house, and then ventured back into the main room. Her stomach reminded her that she had not eaten since dawn, so she investigated the kitchen area, finding bread, butter, and a jar of preserves. She made herself a modest meal, trying not to think about what would happen 5 days from now when the stage returned. Mrs. Chen arrived an hour later, a small woman with silver-streaked hair and an air of unflappable competence. She looked Marguerite over with sharp dark eyes, and then nodded as if satisfied by what she saw. Samuel had apparently explained the situation, because Mrs. Chen simply announced that she would stay as long as needed, and that Marguerite should not worry herself about gossip. "Samuel Jackson is a good man," Mrs. Chen said in accented but perfect English. "He helped my family when others would not. My husband died in a mining accident 6 years ago, and Samuel made sure we did not starve that first winter. My sons work for him sometimes during roundup. You are safe here, Miss Vance." Over dinner, which Mrs. Chen prepared with astonishing speed and skill, Marguerite learned more about her unexpected host. Samuel Jackson had been born in Ohio, come west with his family at 18, and built the Silver Creek Ranch from nothing over the course of 12 years. His parents had died of pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter, and his sister had married a Denver businessman 3 years ago. He ran cattle and horses, supplied beef to the mining camps in the high country, and had a reputation for fair dealing and hard work. "Why has he not married?" Marguerite asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. She was not sure why she wanted to know, only that the question had been nagging at her since Samuel rode off to fetch Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen smiled slightly. "He loved a girl once when he first came to Colorado. She chose someone else, someone with more money and better prospects. Samuel buried himself in work after that. He is kind to everyone, helps his neighbors, but he keeps himself apart. Lonely, I think, though he would never say so." That night, lying in the narrow bed in Samuel Jackson's spare room, Marguerite stared at the ceiling and tried to plan her next move. She could return east, admit defeat, and throw herself on the mercy of distant cousins who had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her. She could stay in Auray and look for work, though what work a gently bred woman with no practical skills could find in a mining town, she had no idea. Or she could do something desperate, something that would have horrified her aunt and shocked her few remaining friends. She could stay. The thought came unbidden, wild and impossible. Samuel Jackson had not sent for her. He did not know her. He had offered shelter out of kindness, not desire for a wife. But something about this place, about the man himself, called to something deep inside her. She had felt more genuine human warmth in a few hours at Silver Creek Ranch than she had in years living among Philadelphia society. Mrs. Chen treated her like a person, not a curiosity or a burden. Samuel had looked at her with respect, even in her most vulnerable moment. It was madness, of course. She pushed the thought away and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come. The next morning, she woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly and found Mrs. Chen already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Samuel was nowhere to be seen, though she could hear the sounds of activity from the barn. "He is up before dawn every day, Mrs. Chen said, answering the unspoken question. "The ranch does not run itself. He will come in when the morning work is done." Marguerite helped with breakfast, her hands clumsy with tasks that were foreign to her. In Philadelphia, she had lived in boarding houses where meals were provided, and before that, Her mother had kept house with the help of a servant. She had never learned to cook or clean properly, skills that suddenly seemed desperately important. Samuel came in as they were setting the table, his hair damp from washing at the pump outside. He nodded to both women and took his seat without fanfare. The meal was eaten mostly in silence, though it was not uncomfortable. When Samuel finished, he looked at Marguerite with those steady blue eyes and asked if she had any plans for the day. "I thought I might help Mrs. Chen," Marguerite said. "If there is work to be done, I should earn my keep." "You are a guest," Samuel said firmly, "not hired help." "I have never been good at sitting idle," Marguerite replied, meeting his gaze. "Please, it would help to have something to do with my hands." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Suit yourself. But if Mrs. Chen works you too hard, you come tell me." Mrs. Chen snorted. "I am not a slave driver, Samuel Jackson. The girl wants to help. I will teach her useful things." And teach her she did. Over the next 3 days, Marguerite learned to cook simple meals, to wash clothes in the big copper tub, to churn butter and collect eggs from the temperamental hens. Her hands, soft from years of genteel uselessness, blistered and then hardened. Her back ached from unfamiliar labor. But there was satisfaction in the work, a sense of purpose she had never felt in her previous life. She saw Samuel throughout each day, though they did not speak much. He was always working, mending fences or training horses, or doing the 1,000 tasks that kept a ranch running. But sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something thoughtful and perhaps a bit wondering. He never made her feel unwelcome, and slowly, almost without realizing it, Marguerite began to feel at home. On the 4th day, Mrs. Chen announced she needed to return to her own home to check on her sons. She pulled Marguerite aside before she left and spoke in a low voice that Samuel could not hear from where he stood talking to one of the ranch hands. "You are thinking of staying," Mrs. Chen said. It was not a question. "I can see it in how you look at this place," at him. "Be careful, Marguerite. Samuel has been hurt before. If you are going to leave, leave now, but if you stay, mean it." Marguerite felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I do not know what I am going to do." "Yes, you do," Mrs. Chen said gently. "You knew the moment you arrived. You are just afraid to admit it." After Mrs. Chen left, the house felt too quiet. Marguerite busied herself with cleaning, scrubbing the floors with a ferocity that left her breathless. Samuel came in for lunch and found her on her hands and knees in the main room, attacking the baseboards with a rag and a bucket of soapy water. "You are going to wear yourself out," he said, and there was amusement in his voice. Marguerite sat back on her heels and pushed a strand of hair out of her face. She knew she must look a mess, her dress damp with sweat and her hair falling from its pins. The house needed cleaning. "The house was clean enough," Samuel said. He pulled out a chair and sat down, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "Miss Vance, can we talk plain for a minute?" Her heart started hammering. "Of course. The stage comes through tomorrow. You will need to decide what you want to do." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "If you want to go back east, I will pay your fare. Consider it the hospitality of Colorado. You should not be left stranded because of someone else's poor timing." "That is very generous," Marguerite said quietly. She set down the rag and stood, her knees protesting. "But I cannot accept charity. It is not charity. It is doing right by someone who got dealt a bad hand through no fault of their own." Samuel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "But if you are thinking of staying in our looking for work, I will help with that too. I know people in town. Someone might need help at the hotel or the general store. And if I wanted to stay here—" The words were out before Marguerite could stop them. She saw Samuel's eyes widen slightly, surprise flickering across his face. "I mean, I know I have no right to ask. I know you did not send for me. but these past few days I have felt more useful, more alive than I have in years. I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Jackson. I can learn. I could earn my place here." Samuel was quiet for so long that Marguerite thought she had made a terrible mistake. She opened her mouth to take it back, to apologize for her presumption, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Miss Vance, I need to be straight with you. If you stay here, people are going to talk. A single woman living on a ranch with a single man, it is not proper. I do not care much what people think of me, but I care what they would think of you. Your reputation would be in tatters within a week." "My reputation in Philadelphia is already destroyed," Marguerite said. "I was a spinster living in a boarding house, alone and unclaimed. At least here I would be doing something worthwhile." "There is only one way it would be proper," Samuel said slowly. "If we married." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marguerite's breath caught in her throat. She had known, on some level, that this was where the conversation was heading, but hearing it said aloud made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "You do not even know me," she whispered. "I know you are brave enough to travel 2,000 miles alone to marry a stranger. I know you are willing to work hard and learn new things. I know you did not fall apart when your plans crumbled. You just looked for a new path forward." Samuel stood and crossed the room to stand in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I know that having you here these past few days has made this house feel less empty. That is more than a lot of married couples start with. Why would you do this?" Marguerite asked. "You could have any woman in our array. You do not need to settle for someone else's rejected bride." Something flashed in Samuel's eyes, quick and fierce. "You were not rejected. You were lied to and left stranded. There is a difference. And I am not looking for just any woman, Miss Vance. I am 32 years old. I have built a good life here, but I am tired of living it alone. If you are looking for romance and poetry, I cannot offer that. But I can offer honesty, hard work, and a home. If that is enough, then stay. Stay anyway, even though you came to the wrong ranch. Stay and build something with me." Marguerite looked into Samuel Jackson's sun-weathered face and saw no trace of deception, no hint of ulterior motive. He was offering her exactly what he said, nothing more and nothing less. A home, a partnership, a chance to be something other than a burden or a charity case. It was not the life she had imagined when she left Philadelphia, but standing in this clean, modest house with this honest, quiet man, she found she wanted it more than anything. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." Samuel let out a breath and the tension in his shoulders eased. "We should do it properly with a preacher and witnesses. Can you be ready by Sunday? That is 4 days from now. It will give you time to be sure, and it will give me time to make arrangements." "I am sure now," Marguerite said. "But Sunday is fine." He nodded and then, almost shyly, reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough against hers, calloused from years of ranch work. He held it gently, as if she were something precious that might break. "I will do right by you, Marguerite, I swear it." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips sent warmth spreading through her chest. "I believe you, Samuel." They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, the enormity of what they had agreed to settling over them. Then Samuel released her and stepped back, suddenly awkward. "I should get back to work. We are repairing the north fence today. Will you be all right here on your own?" "I have floors to finish scrubbing," Marguerite said, and was rewarded by his quick smile. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. Samuel rode into our array and returned with the preacher, Reverend Thomas, a kindly older man who looked at Marguerite with gentle understanding and asked no uncomfortable questions. He also brought back fabric for a dress, soft calico in a shade of blue that reminded her of Samuel's eyes. Mrs. Chen appeared the next morning with her sewing kit and set about making a wedding dress with efficient skill, her needle flying through the fabric with practiced ease. "You are doing the right thing," Mrs. Chen said as she pinned the bodice. "Samuel needs someone, even if he is too stubborn to admit it, and you need a home. It is a good match." Other neighbors arrived over the next days, curious about the woman who had appeared out of nowhere and captured their bachelor neighbor's attention. They were kind, for the most part, though Marguerite could see the speculation in their eyes. She held her head high and answered their questions with calm dignity, refusing to be embarrassed by her unconventional situation. Samuel's closest neighbor, a gruff rancher named Tom Fletcher, pulled her aside on Saturday afternoon. "Samuel is like a brother to me," he said without preamble. "If you hurt him, you will answer to me." "I have no intention of hurting him," Marguerite replied steadily. "I intend to be a good wife and partner." Tom studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. He deserves happiness. Lord knows he has worked hard enough for it." That night, Marguerite barely slept. She kept thinking about the ceremony tomorrow, about standing before God and witnesses and promising to love and honor a man she had known for less than a week. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange calm. This was right. She knew it in her bones, in the way she felt at home in Samuel's kitchen, in the way her heart lifted every time she saw him walking across the yard. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the Colorado sky an impossible blue. Mrs. Chen helped Marguerite dress, her capable hands arranging her hair and fastening the buttons on the new dress. When Marguerite looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was tanned from days of sun, her hands rough from work, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. The ceremony was held in the main room of the house, with a dozen neighbors crowded in to witness. Samuel stood by the fireplace wearing a clean shirt and trousers, his hair still damp from washing. When Marguerite entered, his eyes widened and something that looked like wonder crossed his face. He held out his hand, and she took it, feeling the strength and steadiness in his grip. Reverend Thomas kept the ceremony short and simple, his voice warm as he spoke of commitment and partnership. When it came time for the vows, Samuel spoke clearly and firmly, his eyes never leaving Marguerite's face. She repeated her own vows, meaning every word, and then Samuel was sliding a simple gold band onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but Mrs. Chen had wrapped thread around the back to make it fit. Samuel had apologized earlier for not having time to get it sized properly, but Marguerite loved it just as it was. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas said, and Samuel leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was chaste, but held the promise of more. Marguerite felt heat rise in her cheeks as their neighbors applauded and called out congratulations. The rest of the day passed in a happy blur of food and conversation. Mrs. Chen had organized the women to bring dishes, and tables were set up in the yard groaning under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, pies, and cakes. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel danced with Marguerite, his hand firm on her waist as they moved to a simple waltz. He was not particularly graceful, but he was earnest, and Marguerite found herself smiling up at him, giddy with joy and disbelief that this was her life now. "Happy?" Samuel asked quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Happier than I have been in years," Marguerite admitted. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for saying yes," Samuel replied, "for staying anyway." As the evening wore on, neighbors began to leave, calling out final congratulations and well wishes. Mrs. Chen was the last to go, pressing Marguerite's hand and whispering advice that made her blush. Then they were alone, the house suddenly quiet after the noise and bustle of the day. Marguerite stood in the main room, suddenly uncertain. She was married now, bound to this man by law and before God. She barely knew him, and yet she had promised to spend her life by his side. Samuel seemed equally uncertain, standing by the door with his hands in his pockets. "I want you to know," he said slowly, "that I have expectations. I know this happened fast. If you need time, if you want me to sleep in the barn or out on the porch, I will. I am not going to force anything." The kindness of it, the sheer decency, made Marguerite's eyes sting with sudden tears. She crossed to him and took his hands, pulling them from his pockets and holding them in hers. "You are my husband, Samuel. I do not want you sleeping in the barn. I want us to start our marriage properly." She saw him swallow hard, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Marguerite said, and found that it was true. She had made her choice, and she did not regret it. Samuel led her to his bedroom, a space even more Spartan than the rest of the house. The bed was large and covered with a quilt that looked handmade, likely by his sister or mother. He lit a lamp on the dresser, then turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way she had not seen before. "I have not done this much," he admitted. "I might not be very good at it." Marguerite felt some of her own nervousness ease at his honesty. "I have not done it at all," she said. "So we will figure it out together." What followed was tender and awkward and sweet, two people learning each other in the most intimate way possible. Samuel was gentle with her, mindful of her inexperience, and when it was over, he held her close and pressed kisses to her hair. Marguerite fell asleep with her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart, and thought that perhaps she had arrived at exactly the right ranch after all. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt natural, as if Marguerite had always been part of Silver Creek Ranch. She woke before dawn each morning to make breakfast while Samuel saw to the animals. They ate together in comfortable silence, then went about their separate tasks. Marguerite threw herself into learning everything she could about running a household in the wilderness. Mrs. Chen visited often, teaching her to preserve vegetables, to make soap, to turn tough cuts of meat into tender stews. The older woman had become like a mother to her, and Marguerite was grateful for the friendship. Samuel was teaching her about the ranch itself, showing her the best grazing lands, introducing her to each horse by name and personality. She learned that he had a gift with animals, a patience that allowed him to gentle even the most skittish colt. She loved watching him work, the easy competence in every movement, the quiet murmur of his voice as he talked to the horses. At night, they came together in the big bed, and slowly, tentatively, they began to truly know each other. Samuel told her about his childhood in Ohio, about the journey west that had been full of hardship and adventure. He spoke of his parents with deep affection, and she could hear the grief still raw in his voice when he mentioned their deaths. She told him about her own losses, about the loneliness of being the last of her family, about the desperate feeling that had driven her to answer Samuel Henderson's advertisement. "I am glad he died," Samuel said one night, and then immediately looked horrified. "That is a terrible thing to say." "I do not mean I am glad he is dead. I just mean I am glad you came here instead of to him." Marguerite laughed and kissed him. "I know what you meant, and I am glad too. I think we suit each other, Samuel Jackson." "I think we do, Mrs. Jackson," he replied, and there was wonder in his voice, as if he still could not quite believe she was real. As summer faded into autumn, Marguerite realized she was happier than she had ever been. The work was hard, harder than anything she had known in her previous life, but it was satisfying in a way that genteel idleness had never been. She felt strong, capable, useful. She felt loved, because Samuel did love her, though he had not said the words yet. She could see it in the way he looked at her, in the small kindnesses he showed every day, the way he always saved the best piece of meat for her plate, the way he brought her wildflowers from the high meadows, the way he held her at night as if she were something infinitely precious. And she loved him. It had happened so gradually that she could not pinpoint the exact moment, but somewhere between the morning chores and the evening meals, between learning to ride and learning to can vegetables, she had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with her accidental husband. The first snow came in late October, dusting the mountains with white and bringing a sharp chill to the air. Samuel spent long days making sure the ranch was ready for winter, repairing the barn roof, checking the stores of hay and grain, bringing the cattle down from the high pastures. Marguerite helped where she could, though she was still learning the rhythms of ranch life. One evening, she was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she felt Samuel's arms come around her from behind. He rested his chin on top of her head and held her close, and she could feel the tension in his body. "What is wrong?" she asked, turning in his arms to look up at him. "Tom Fletcher stopped by today while you were at Mrs. Chen's," Samuel said. "He had news from town." They found Samuel Henderson's will. He left everything to a cousin back east, some man who never set foot in Colorado. The cousin is selling Golden Valley Ranch, already has a buyer lined up. Some businessman from Denver who wants to turn it into a hunting lodge for rich folks. Marguerite was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. "How do you feel about that?" "I do not care about the ranch," Samuel said. "But I keep thinking if Henderson had not died, you would have married him. You would have gone to Golden Valley, and I never would have met you." "The thought of it makes me feel sick, Marguerite. The thought of you belonging to someone else, of never knowing you existed." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the roughness of stubble under her palms. "But I did not marry him. I married you." "I am here, Samuel, and I am not going anywhere." "I love you," he said, the words bursting out as if he could not contain them any longer. "I know it has only been a few months. I know we got married for practical reasons. But I love you, Marguerite. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Joy flooded through her, bright and warm. "I love you too," she said. "I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you offered me shelter even though you did not know me. You are the best man I have ever known, Samuel Jackson." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and dinner was forgotten for quite some time. Winter settled over Colorado with a vengeance, bringing deep snows and bitter cold. Marguerite had never experienced anything like it, but Samuel had prepared well, and they were snug in the house with plenty of food and firewood. The work was different in winter, focused on caring for the animals and maintaining equipment, but there was also more time for rest and companionship. They spent long evenings by the fire, Samuel teaching Marguerite to play chess with a carved set his father had made. She was terrible at it, but he was patient, and she loved the quiet focus on his face as he planned his moves. Sometimes she would read aloud from the few books they had, her voice filling the cozy room while Samuel worked on mending tack or sharpening tools. It was during one of these evenings in late January that Marguerite realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling strange for weeks, tired and queasy in the mornings, but she had attributed it to the unfamiliar food or the hard work. But as she sat by the fire with her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, she knew with absolute certainty that she was carrying Samuel's child. She told him that night in bed, whispering the news against his shoulder. He went very still, and for a moment she worried he was upset. But then he pulled back to look at her, and his face was full of such wonder and joy that her breath caught. "A baby," he said, his voice hoarse. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Marguerite asked, needing to hear him say it. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Samuel said. He laid his hand over her stomach, his palm warm through the fabric of her nightgown. I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I know how to express. You have given me so much, Marguerite. A home that feels like a home. Love, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve any of it. You were kind when you did not have to be, Marguerite said simply. You saw someone in need and helped without expecting anything in return. That is who you are, Samuel. That is why I love you. The baby was due in September, and as winter gave way to spring, Marguerite's belly began to swell with new life. Mrs. Chen was delighted, immediately taking on the role of grandmother and advisor. She brought baby clothes her own children had worn, soft little gowns yellowed with age but still serviceable. She gave advice on what to eat, how to stay healthy, what to expect during the birth. Samuel became almost comically protective, insisting that Marguerite rest more and work less. She argued that she was pregnant, not ill, but she was secretly touched by his concern. He built a cradle from cedar wood, his hands careful and precise as he sanded each piece until it was smooth as glass. He set it up in their bedroom, and Marguerite would sometimes catch him standing over it with a dreamy expression, lost in thoughts of the child who would soon sleep there. As her belly grew, Samuel's wonder seemed to grow with it. He loved to feel the baby move, his hands gentle on her skin as he marveled at each kick and flutter. He talked to their unborn child, telling stories about the ranch and the mountains and all the things they would do together. Marguerite fell even more deeply in love with him during those months, seeing the tender father he would be. Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. Calves were born in the pastures, and Marguerite helped Samuel tend them, learning to bottle feed the ones whose mothers had died or rejected them. The work was exhausting, but she loved it, loved the feel of new life in her arms, the trust in the calves' big dark eyes. Summer arrived hot and dry, and Marguerite found herself moving slower, her pregnant body heavy in the heat. Samuel hired a young man named Billy to help with the ranch work so he could stay closer to the house. Billy was 19, eager and good-natured, and he took to ranch life with enthusiasm. He also seemed fascinated by the idea that Mrs. Jackson had arrived as a mail-order bride for the wrong ranch, and Samuel had convinced her to stay anyway. "That is the most romantic thing I ever heard," Billy said one afternoon while they were mending fence. Samuel had repeated the conversation to Marguerite that evening, his cheeks slightly red with embarrassment. "He is young," Samuel said. "He thinks everything is romantic." "It is romantic," Marguerite said, laughing. "You offered me a home when I had nothing. You married me to protect my reputation. You fell in love with me anyway. How is that not romantic?" Samuel pulled her close, mindful of her swollen belly between them. "When you put it that way, I suppose it is," he admitted. "I just never thought of myself as the romantic type." "You are more romantic than you know," Marguerite said. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "You built our baby a cradle with your own hands. You bring me flowers. You tell me you love me every single day. That is romance, Samuel." As September approached, Marguerite found herself growing nervous. Mrs. Chen assured her that birth was natural, that women had been doing it since the beginning of time, but Marguerite could not shake her fear. Samuel was even more nervous, pacing the house and snapping at Billy over small mistakes until Marguerite finally told him to get a hold of himself. "I am sorry," Samuel said. "I am just scared. What if something goes wrong? Women die in childbirth, Marguerite. I cannot lose you, I cannot." She took his face in her hands and made him look at her. "You are not going to lose me. I am strong, and Mrs. Chen knows what she is doing. Our baby is going to come into this world healthy and squalling, and we are going to raise him or her to be as good and kind as you are. Trust me, Samuel. Trust that everything is going to be all right." Labor started on a cool September morning, just as the sun was rising over the mountains. Marguerite woke to cramping low in her belly, and she knew immediately what was happening. She woke Samuel, who practically fell out of bed in his haste to get dressed and ride for Mrs. Chen. The older woman arrived within the hour, taking over with calm efficiency. She banished Samuel from the bedroom, and Marguerite could hear him pacing in the main room, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the day and into the evening. Mrs. Chen was a steady presence, encouraging Marguerite, helping her breathe through the pain, never once showing doubt or fear. When the baby finally came, sliding into the world with a lusty cry, Marguerite wept with relief and joy. Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby quickly and then placed the tiny bundle in Marguerite's arms. "A boy," Mrs. Chen said, her smile wide. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Samuel burst into the room before Mrs. Chen could stop him, his face pale and his eyes wide. "Is she all right? Is the baby all right?" "Come meet your son," Marguerite said, her voice exhausted but happy. Samuel approached the bed slowly, as if afraid he might be dreaming. He looked down at the baby in Marguerite's arms, and she watched emotions chase across his face faster than she could name them. Wonder, joy, fear, love. "So much love. He is perfect," Samuel whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you." They named him Matthew after Samuel's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Samuel was besotted from the first moment, spending hours just watching Matthew sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. He was a devoted father, changing nappies without complaint and walking the floor at night when Matthew was fussy so Marguerite could rest. The years that followed were full and happy. Matthew grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy who followed his father everywhere, chattering constantly and asking endless questions. Samuel was endlessly patient, teaching his son about the ranch and the animals, instilling in him the values of hard work and kindness. When Matthew was 3, Marguerite gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah. She was tiny and delicate, with Samuel's wheat-colored hair and Marguerite's green eyes. Samuel cried when he held her for the first time, this little girl who had him wrapped around her finger from the moment she drew breath. The ranch prospered under Samuel's careful management. They added more land, bought better breeding stock, built a larger barn. Billy stayed on as a permanent ranch hand and eventually married a girl from town, bringing her to live in a small house Samuel helped him build on the property. Mrs. Chen remained a constant presence, beloved by the children who called her grandmother Chen and followed her around begging for stories and sweets. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel gave Marguerite a beautiful chestnut mare, gentle and well-trained. "So you can ride with me," he said. "See all the places I love and want to share with you." They rode out together that afternoon, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen, climbing up into the high meadows where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. They dismounted by a crystal-clear stream and sat on the bank, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked suddenly. "Staying here instead of going back east? You could have had an easier life, Marguerite. Servants and society and all those things you grew up with." Marguerite looked at him in genuine surprise. "I have never regretted it for a single moment. This is my home, Samuel. You are my home. Our children, this ranch, this life we have built together. It is everything I never knew I wanted." "I am glad," Samuel said softly, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You arrived at the wrong ranch, but somehow it was exactly right. You were exactly right." She kissed him then, there by the stream with the mountains rising around them and the sky impossibly blue overhead. 5 years ago, she had been a lost and desperate woman, arriving at a strange ranch to marry a man who had never sent for her. And Samuel, kind and decent Samuel, had looked at her and said, "Stay anyway." Those 2 words had changed everything, had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. More children came in the years that followed. Another son, Thomas, who had his father's quiet temperament and love of animals. Then twin girls, Anna and Emma, who kept everyone on their toes with their mischievous antics. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, new rooms added as needed. The sound of children's laughter filled the spaces that had once been so quiet and empty. Samuel proved to be everything Marguerite had hoped for and more. He was a devoted husband, a loving father, a respected member of their community. He taught his sons to be strong and honorable, his daughters to be confident and capable. He never once made Marguerite feel less than equal, always valuing her opinion, treating her as a true partner in every aspect of their lives. Marguerite herself blossomed in ways she never could have imagined. The shy, uncertain woman who had arrived in Colorado was replaced by someone confident and capable. She became known throughout the area as someone who could be counted on, always ready to help a neighbor in need. She learned to ride as well as any man, to rope and brand and doctor sick cattle. She kept meticulous records of the ranch's finances, managed the household with effortless efficiency, and still found time to read to her children every night before bed. Mrs. Chen grew older but never less vital, remaining a central figure in their lives until she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Marguerite mourned her like a mother, grateful beyond words for the friendship and guidance the older woman had provided. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the ranch, and Marguerite made sure fresh flowers were placed on her grave every week. Billy and his wife had children of their own, and the 2 families became intertwined, the children growing up together like cousins. The ranch employed several hands now, and Samuel had a reputation as a fair and generous employer. Men lined up for the chance to work at Silver Creek Ranch, knowing they would be treated well and paid fairly. As the children grew and the ranch prospered, Samuel and Marguerite found moments to steal away together, to remember who they had been before the chaos and joy of family life had consumed them. They would ride up into the mountains, sometimes staying overnight in a small cabin Samuel had built years ago, and they would talk and laugh and love each other with all the passion of their early days. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Samuel said during one of these trips when they were lying together under the stars. "I think about what would have happened if you had gotten on that stage and left after 5 days like we planned. If you had been too scared or too proud to take a chance on a stranger. We would have both gone on with our lives, never knowing what we could have been together." "But I did not leave," Marguerite said. "I stayed. I will always stay, Samuel, for as long as we both shall live." The years rolled on, bringing changes both large and small. Colorado gained statehood, and they celebrated with the rest of the territory. The railroad extended its reach, making travel easier and bringing new settlers to the area. Ouray grew from a rough mining town into a proper community with schools and churches, and even a small hospital. Matthew grew into a young man much like his father, quiet and competent and kind. He had his own ideas about ranching, and Samuel encouraged him, teaching him everything he knew while giving him space to make his own mistakes and discoveries. The daughters, too, were growing, beautiful and intelligent, with the same independent spirit that had brought their mother west all those years ago. On a warm summer evening, when Samuel was 52 and Marguerite 47, they sat on the porch they had built onto the house years ago, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Their children were scattered around the property, the younger ones playing in the yard while the older ones helped with the evening chores. Grandchildren were already appearing, Matthew having married the previous year and made them proud grandparents to a beautiful baby girl. 20 years, Samuel said softly. Has it really been 20 years since you stepped off that stage? 20 of the best years of my life, Marguerite replied. She reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long familiarity. You gave me everything, Samuel. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I thought I was destined to live my life alone. You gave me the same, Samuel said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I was existing before you arrived, Marguerite, just going through the motions of life. But you made me live again. You made me believe in second chances and happy endings. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, the first stars beginning to appear overhead. The sounds of their family surrounded them, voices and laughter, the occasional shout of a child at play, the lowing of cattle settling down for the night. It was the music of a life well lived, of dreams realized in unexpected ways. Later that night, after the children were all in bed and the house was quiet, Samuel pulled Marguerite into his arms. They moved together with the practiced ease of two people who knew each other completely, who had learned every secret of body and heart over decades of intimacy. And when they lay sated and drowsy afterward, Samuel whispered the words he said every night without fail. I love you, Marguerite Jackson. Thank you for staying. I love you too, she murmured back. Thank you for asking me to. More years passed in a blur of seasons and celebrations, of work and rest, of joy and occasional sorrow. They lost friends to age and illness, said goodbye to neighbors who moved on to other places. But through it all, Samuel and Marguerite remained constant, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. When Samuel turned 60, Matthew and his siblings threw a surprise celebration, inviting everyone from miles around. The house and yard overflowed with people, all of them eager to honor the man who had been friend, neighbor, employer, mentor. Marguerite watched her husband move through the crowd, greeting everyone with genuine warmth, and her heart swelled with pride and love. During the party, Tom Fletcher, now elderly and silver-haired but still sharp, pulled Marguerite aside. I remember the day you arrived, he said. I was not sure about you, if I am being honest. Thought you might be some city girl who would not last a month. I am glad to have been wrong. You have been good for Samuel, good for all of us. You belong here, Mrs. Jackson. Thank you, Tom, Marguerite said, genuinely touched. That means more than you know. As Samuel's 60th year turned into his 61st, his health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that came with a lifetime of hard physical labor. His joints ached in cold weather. He moved more slowly than he once had, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Marguerite never wavered. Marguerite herself was feeling the effects of age, silver streaking through her dark hair, lines deepening around her eyes and mouth. But she carried her years with grace, still capable and strong, still the heart of their family. The children, all adults now with families of their own, remained close, visiting often and helping with the ranch work. Matthew had officially taken over management of Silver Creek, though Samuel still offered advice and assistance. One autumn afternoon, Samuel and Marguerite rode up to the high meadow where they had spent so many happy hours over the years. They moved more slowly than they once had, their horses picking their way carefully up the familiar trail. When they reached the meadow, they dismounted and sat by the stream, just as they had done decades earlier. "I have been thinking," Samuel said, his voice thoughtful, "about legacy, about what we leave behind when we are gone, and I realized that everything that matters is already here. Our children, our grandchildren, the ranch that will continue after us, the community we helped build, the love we shared, that is legacy enough for any man. For any woman too," Marguerite said softly. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "We did good, Samuel. We built something real and lasting, and it all started because you were kind enough to offer shelter to a stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Samuel said. "Well, that and asking you to stay anyway." They sat there until the sun began to set, reluctant to leave this place that held so many memories. Finally, as the air turned cool, they mounted up and headed back down to the ranch. They rode side by side as they had always done, partners in every sense of the word. The seasons turned, and life continued its steady rhythm. Samuel's 70th birthday came and went, celebrated with another gathering of friends and family. He moved more slowly now, spent more time in his chair by the fire, but his eyes still lit up whenever Marguerite entered the room. His love for her had never diminished, never faded, remaining as constant as the mountains that surrounded their home. Marguerite, at 65, was still the capable manager of the household, still the wise matriarch everyone turned to for advice and comfort. Her grandchildren adored her, begging for stories about the old days, about how she had come west as a mail-order bride and ended up at the wrong ranch. They never tired of hearing how their grandfather had asked her to stay anyway, how that simple act of kindness had led to the family they all belonged to. On a spring morning in 1916, exactly 40 years after Marguerite had stepped off that stagecoach, Samuel woke with an odd pain in his chest. He tried to hide it from Marguerite, but she knew him too well, saw immediately that something was wrong. By the time Matthew arrived with the doctor from town, Samuel was fading fast. His heart, strong for so many years, was finally giving out. The family gathered, children and grandchildren crowding into the bedroom, all of them tearful but trying to be strong. Samuel looked at each of them, his eyes full of love and pride. But it was Marguerite he reached for, Marguerite whose hand he held as his breathing grew labored. "My Marguerite," he whispered, "my beautiful girl, I have loved you from the moment you arrived at the wrong ranch. Every day with you has been a gift. Do not leave me," Marguerite pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Samuel, I cannot do this without you." "You can," Samuel said with certainty. "You are the strongest person I know, but I will be waiting for you. However long it takes, I will be waiting. We will be together again, I promise." He died as the sun rose over the mountains, peaceful and surrounded by love. Marguerite held him as he took his last breath, her heart breaking even as she was grateful he had not suffered long. They buried him on the hillside next to Mrs. Chen, with a view of the ranch he had built and the mountains he had loved. The grief was crushing, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. Marguerite moved through the following days in a daze, accepting condolences from what seemed like the entire county. Everyone had a story about Samuel, about his kindness or his fairness or his quiet wisdom. It helped a little to know that so many people had valued him as much as she did. Matthew wanted her to move into the main house with his family, but Marguerite refused. The house she had shared with Samuel held their entire life together, every room full of memories she was not ready to leave. She stayed, keeping busy with the work of living, finding comfort in routine and in the presence of her children and grandchildren. The years after Samuel's death were quiet ones. Marguerite remained active and involved with the ranch and the community, but a part of her was always waiting, counting down the days until she could be reunited with her husband. She never remarried, never even considered it. Samuel had been the love of her life, her partner in every way that mattered. No one else could ever take his place. She lived to see great-grandchildren born, to see the ranch prosper and grow into one of the most successful in Colorado. She lived to see the world change in ways she could never have imagined, automobiles replacing horses, electricity coming to even the most remote areas. But through all the changes, Silver Creek Ranch remained, a testament to the vision and hard work of Samuel and Marguerite Jackson. On a summer afternoon in 1926, Marguerite sat on the porch of the house, now expanded and improved by several generations but still recognizable as the modest structure where she had first found shelter 50 years earlier. She was surrounded by family, dozens of descendants all gathered to celebrate her 75th birthday. They toasted her with lemonade and cake, told stories about her adventures, thanked her for being the foundation of their family. As the sun set and the party wound down, Marguerite's oldest granddaughter, also named Marguerite, sat beside her on the porch swing. "Tell me again, grandmother," she said, "about how you and grandfather met." Marguerite smiled, the familiar story rising to her lips. "I arrived as a mail-order bride to the wrong ranch," she began, her voice still strong despite her age. "I was meant for a man named Samuel Henderson at Golden Valley Ranch, but I ended up here at Silver Creek instead. Your grandfather, Samuel Jackson, did not send for me. But when he found out I had nowhere to go, he looked at me and said, 'Stay anyway.' Those 2 words changed my life." "It is so romantic," young Marguerite sighed, "like a fairy tale." "It was better than a fairy tale," Marguerite said, "because it was real. We built our life together day by day, year by year. We worked hard and we loved hard, and we never took a single moment for granted. That is what I want you to remember, sweetheart. Real love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about choosing each other every single day and building something that lasts." That night, Marguerite lay in the bed she had shared with Samuel for so many years, and she felt a profound sense of peace. She had lived a long and full life, had known love and joy and purpose. She had been blessed beyond measure, and she was grateful for every moment. When she woke the next morning, she felt an odd sensation, as if something inside her had shifted. There was no pain, just a gentle loosening, a sense of something letting go. She called for Matthew, and he came immediately, his face creasing with worry when he saw her expression. "It is all right," Marguerite said, taking her son's hand. "I am not afraid, I am ready." "Mother, no," Matthew said, his voice breaking. "Not yet, please. I have had 50 wonderful years since your father died," Marguerite said gently. "I have seen all of you grow and thrive. I have held great-grandchildren in my arms, but I am tired now, Matthew, and your father is waiting for me. I can feel it." The family gathered once more, surrounding her with love. She looked at each of them, memorizing faces, storing up memories to carry with her. And then, as the afternoon light streamed through the window, Marguerite closed her eyes and let go. She died as she had lived, with grace and courage, surrounded by the family she and Samuel had created together. They buried her next to Samuel on the hillside, their graves side by side just as they had been in life. The headstones were simple, bearing just their names and dates in a single line. She arrived at the wrong ranch. He asked her to stay anyway. The story of Samuel and Marguerite Jackson became legend in the area, passed down through generations, as an example of how love could bloom in unexpected places, how kindness could change everything. Silver Creek Ranch continued to prosper. always owned and operated by their descendants, a living monument to what they had built together. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the valley and the stars came out over the mountains, locals swore you could sometimes see two figures riding together in the high meadows, side by side as they had always been, together for eternity.